All right, welcome back. I forgot to mention, so the previous section on plate tectonics, we're going to actually spend Unit 2, that's going to be the whole conversation, is plate tectonics. So we'll get more into that, so don't worry if some of that stuff you weren't quite grasping. Same thing with evolution. I think Unit 7, so later on in the semester, we'll get back into this topic, as well as this section after this, which will be the last one on geologic time. That'll be a whole other unit. I think that's Unit 4 as well. So some of these things we're going to expand upon. All right. Okay, so the theory of evolution. Again, theory. Highest level of knowing. Right? Big Bang theory, nebular theory, plate tectonic theory, theory of evolution. These kind of four theories that kind of play a big role. But as far as the major themes, the planet changes. That's plate tectonics. Life changes, theory of evolution, and this happens over a long period of time. Those are the big themes of historical geology. So anyway, the theory of evolution, organic, biologic evolution. So it really provides a framework for understanding the history of life. I'm sure you may recognize its name, but Charles Darwin was the one who kind of stumbled upon, this in his studies throughout his travels, looking at living organisms, looking at fossils as well. All of this was published in his famous book on the origin of species by means of natural selection, published in 1859. Really revolutionized biology. And it kind of, one aspect of how he stumbled upon it was finches. So looking at a finch, which is a type of bird, and noticing that some of the different finches, while they're kind of actually very similar in nature, but their beaks were a little bit different. Why is that the case? Well, the reason that's the case, that even though these finches are all finches, but why they all look a little bit different is because they evolved. So there was some ancestor finch, and depending on where these finches migrated and found themselves, there was different food sources. So different beak shapes were selected as a means for being the most efficient way to utilize that food source. So some birds, through natural selection, eventually evolved as a species to have kind of a more narrow-shaped beak for insect eating, more of a broad beak for seed eating, and more of a long mid-sized beak for kind of woodpecker-type insect eating, kind of drilling into areas. But it's not that the species themselves change during their life, but through a series of generations and ancestors over time, variations in their DNA causing beaks to have different shapes were just more suited for a particular food source in a particular area. So those birds thrived. The ones that didn't have a proper beak shape for the food source died. So the only ones left were the ones with a particular different beak, and that became the chosen, selected trait that kind of passed on. And so evolution happens between generations, not like all of a sudden I'm going to change to a different beak. It just happens over generations. So over time, geologic time, deep time. So all present-day organisms are related and descended from organisms that lived during the past. Natural selection is the mechanism that drives evolution. Again, it's not like a particular thing mutates and changes as it's living. It's over time, particular traits are chosen, and those are passed on. And that's what accounts for evolution. And natural selection results in the survival, and it's those traits of the surviving species that are passed on, and therefore over generations things change. And it's those traits that are selected that are best adapted for the environment in which organisms live. Perfect example, all right? So imagine there's a species of mice, right? And they moved in a particular area. Some of the mice are brown, some of the mice are gray. Well, the kind of surrounding rock, or black, it's black and tan, excuse me. So the black mice against the black rock, a little bit harder to see. The tan mice against the tan rock, a little bit easier to see. So if there is a hawk in the area, for instance, well, that bird is going to see the tan mouse a little bit easier, and it's going to pick off those tan mouses. So what's going to happen now, even though initially there was more tan mice than black ones, well, now there's more black ones, and as those continue to breed and over ancestors and ancestors and ancestors and generations and generations and generations, excuse me, that black fur trait will be passed on. And so it's going to be those that survive because of their fur color. That was what kind of nature selected to thrive, because the bird can't really see them. So those are the ones that are going to continue to live. And over time, maybe this whole species of mice eventually turns to just the black mice, because all the tan ones get picked off and eaten. It's natural selection. Nature is choosing a particular trait in a particular subsection of an organism that best suits the environment to be passed on. That's how evolution is. And we see that not only, in organisms that are alive, but organisms that are dead via fossils. So the fossil record is the most compelling evidence in favor of evolution. Fossils, which also are another separate unit, which we will get into, unit 5 maybe? It's another unit. So we'll talk about fossils specifically, because that's a major part of historical geology. But fossils are the remains or traces of once living organisms. Sometimes we can see the imprint and outline of these things. Sometimes they're just traces of them, tracks left behind. It's not the organism itself, but a track can be a fossil. Poop left behind. It's not the actual organism itself, but the poop is also a fossil. So just remains or traces of once living organisms. And fossils demonstrate that Earth has a history of life, and that history has changed. One very interesting example that I didn't really know until pretty recently is that whales actually evolved from land animals. Right? Whales are mammals, right? Just like we are mammals. They actually evolved from land animals. So there was this, I think it said it was kind of like a hippo-ish related type organism, Diacodexis. Right? And that over time evolved into Pakicetus. And there are some very similar structures within kind of the hip bones and the leg bones and in the spine. And we can kind of, this is how we trace evolution, looking for similar features. Things have changed, but there's also these similar features. And that kind of leads to Ambulocetus. Again, very similar kind of hip structures and bone structures here, somewhat similar faces. Things are changing, though, a little bit. And that kind of eventually led to the Dorodon, and you can see how, the legs and the hips are getting smaller and smaller and smaller until we get to our kind of modern day kind of whale, in this case a baleen whale. So whales, crazy enough, you can't see it because they've now kind of changed and evolved over time, and it's so small, but they do have internally a pelvis bone and hind limbs like legs. It's just they're inside. They're just bones on the inside. There's no protrusions, right? So they have hips and leg bones. Why the hell would they have hips and leg bones? Well, it's because they evolved from a land species, which needs hips and leg bones to get around. Crazy stuff. All right, so I think that brings us to the end of evolution. Again, that's a whole other unit we'll get into, so more fun on that. Again, the theory of evolution, highest level of knowing. But before we go, remember how last video I told you the super secret code was 2222, so 4 2s? Let's scratch that. Let's forget that. Let's make the code 3333, so 4 3s. 3333. That's the super secret code. You see how that works? Right? You see how that works? You see how I might give it to you, but then I might change something? Sometimes I might not. Sometimes I might just give it to you. Sometimes I might spread the code one number at a time over a number of different videos. But again, I'm not trying to be a butthole by doing all this. I'm trying to make sure you're present and you're aware and you're just letting this stuff soak in. Okay? That's what's going to help you be successful. It can seem painful, I get it, but this is the best way to ensure your success. I want you to do well in this class. All right? I don't want you to just skate by. So let's make that change to the super secret code. It's 3333. So we have one more video to go on geologic time. All right, stay tuned. You never know. I might change the code again. So I'll see you for one last video for this unit. See you I don't know, in a few seconds or whenever you watch the next video.